I didn't go directly into design, but always at the back of my head was having a nice home, being interested in architecture, enjoying furnishings and antiques and art. Just always a big part of who I was, even as a young person.
So you have a lot of return clients.
We do. We are so grateful. That takes a while. From somebody who started with zero, no clients at all. So she goes on and on about her husband, and it's sounding like a bit of a weird relationship, and she's not really sure about him, and she's a little concerned, and then all of a sudden we hear this bang, and she goes, "Oh, it's my husband." I knew that because I saw this, you said that, your husband mentioned something else. So it's intelligence gathering.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nadine. I mean, you just solved the problem. I guess
just put a piece of the puzzle together.
Thank you, U.S. Customs Service. And I remember I came home from school one day, and my mother, for the first time, she'd gotten to the point she could afford a decorator. And she had a decorator come in and help her with 2 houses. And in this house, they had installed some draperies. And I came home, I went in the living room to practice the piano, and I said, "Oh, our house is beautiful." The draperies just really impressed me.
Hello everyone, welcome to Design Discussions with Nadine. I'm Nadine, and today's guest is Pamela O'Brien with Pamela Hope Designs. How are you, ma'am?
Great, good morning, how are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for joining me here. It's going to be exciting to talk about all things design and some interesting facts about your history and different careers and all kinds of things. So thanks again for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure.
So the first thing I want to touch on is how long have you been an interior designer and how did you get into it?
I always had a love of houses, and I think that's kind of inherent in my family. Having a nice home at whatever level you happen to be in life, your first little college apartment. My mother was a young military wife with, she had to save up for a tablecloth. She would buy a nice tablecloth, then she'd save up for a lamp, and that lamp was probably in our living room for the next 15 years. She took care of things, but it was always a very important part of my family. I didn't go directly into design, but always at the back of my head was having a nice home, being interested in architecture, enjoying furnishings and antiques and art. Just always a big part of who I was, even as a young person.
That's great, and I see that with a lot of people in the industry, whether it be architects or designers. It seems like it's something that people were interested in from a very young age.
Or you might have an aha moment.
Yeah.
I actually had one. I came home. My father had done some construction work on the East Coast, and we moved to Salt Lake City, Utah in the 70s when it was, frankly, not as sophisticated as, say, New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C., where we had been, but it was a wonderful place to be a kid. And my parents built a really beautiful colonial-style house in an older neighborhood, so it actually fit in, and I really loved the home. And I remember I came home from school one day, and my mother, for the first time, she'd gotten to the point she could afford a decorator, and she had a decorator come in and help her with 2 houses. And in this house, they had installed some draperies, and I came home, I went in the living room to practice the piano, and I said, "Oh, our house is beautiful." The draperies just really impressed me.
And that is the aha moment, right? Where you think, wow, this is, even something as simple as a drapery can change the whole look of a room.
It was amazing. I remember that moment walking. I didn't really love practicing piano, but that's where the piano was. I went in the living room and I had my little surprise of beautiful draperies. And I said, "Mom, our house is beautiful."
Aww. And so before we get into kind of your design business, I want to talk a little bit about your previous career with a large government agency and what you did there. And because it's a very interesting thing to me that you came from something so different and went into interior design. So let's talk about what you did, how long you worked for that agency, and interesting facts about that.
Yes, it's funny because in that life, no one believes that I would be doing design. And in my design life, everyone's like, "You did what when you were younger?" But it was right out of graduate school, and I had studied French. And I wasn't going to be a French professor or teacher, and I really didn't have a plan. I was thinking maybe foreign service or something like that. Well, I ended up just through a friend of a friend getting a very, very good opportunity to work for what was the U.S. Customs Service. Now it's part of Homeland Security. I really grew up there. I went from being a student and a graduate student, in an academic environment where there aren't always a whole lot of real world issues, to a very much real world government organization with big, important things that we had to deal with, like drugs and guns and illegal money and smuggling and weapons and a lot of very serious things. So I started out as an intelligence analyst for them. And basically, being a fairly good research student or graduate student, if you can read and write and perform research and write a document or a paper, that's very useful in the intelligence world. So I did quite well at that, but I just wasn't that interested in crime. Sure, it's great to solve it, but I'm not naturally someone who would just delve into crime. However, they had a public affairs office, and I thought, I can promote the good stuff, hopefully let people know about the bad stuff, maybe solve some of that stuff through the use of media, and also telling, our side of the story and providing correct information, which is, I think, increasingly important these days. So I was able to go into the public affairs department, and I had just a wonderful run there. I really loved it. It was very, very demanding. This was during the war on drugs. I did an average of 125 news events a year. That is a lot. That could be anything from a major article to 3 small articles in a small border town to doing an America's Most Wanted reenactment that took 4 days and several helicopters and a bunch of our air patrol people and lots of people from Hollywood. So all kinds of news events I did that for about 6 years at Customs, and I learned so much.
That seems like it's a very exciting career. Demanding, sure, but
it was. Yeah, you're always on
not
call.
boring.
News doesn't really have a schedule. The news doesn't care if it's Christmas Day or New Year's or you're on vacation. But I think we had a very, very good press shop. We handled it well. Always told the truth, did everything we had to do, and tried to take good care of the American people, I guess is what we would say today.
Yeah. And do you feel like at all that career helped you in your current business as an interior designer?
In several ways it did, actually, because intelligence, I've always been good at writing. I always liked language arts. I always liked English. And then, of course, liked languages so much, I added French and Italian to my repertoire. But I found that being a good writer always got you noticed. I was asked to write a speech for the commissioner at one point, which really wasn't theoretically, I wasn't in that department, but being a good writer always got you noticed, and people would come to you when they needed things written or published, or even I did the voicemail responses on our, new answering machine that became a phone tree, press 1 to be connected to, A,
Whoever,
and press 2 to be connected to B. So things like that always allowed me to interact with maybe some of the higher level officials. And I got good training from them, mentoring from them, and some time with them. So I learned a lot more about how to manage such a large organization with so much policy and so many procedures and so many rules and a lot of accountability. I mean, you're accountable to so many different entities when you work for the government.
Sure.
So I really learned a lot. So I think the writing helped a lot. And then, of course, getting really good at media work was very, very helpful. We were given some wonderful training, and I thought I was a good writer, so I go into writing training and thinking, I've got this nailed. Just like if you remember in school, papers came back they looked like they were bleeding to death, slashed through my articles by these 2 newspaper pros. And it was a very different way to write for the media. And so I very much learned how to write a good article. And when I got back, my articles would make it into the newspaper or a magazine, basically word for word after that training. So that helped a lot. In my early days of design, I was able to respond to media inquiries or do articles on design, even when honestly, I didn't have that many projects. And completely honestly, I didn't have one that I thought was publishable or ready for photographs, but I could talk about it. And by talking about it, I could get some attention. And that did very well for me in the beginning and got me some very good projects that later could be published and photographed.
Oh, that's great. And you do projects all over the place, right? So
we do.
I know you do a lot of remote work with those because, of course, it's hard to be in 3 places at one time, right? So give us some examples of some places where you've done some design work and how this now technology that we have has helped with being able to have an ease of remote work in interior design.
Yes, it definitely has. Well, I feel for most of us, design is fairly local. Most of my projects are in the Houston area. Now, there's a level of locality where sometimes it's a 2-hour drive, when theoretically I'm still more or less in my area.
Yeah.
But with the remote work, a lot of it will stem from a client who you do their home or you do their office work, and then they say, I have a beach house, or I have a ski house, or we're thinking of moving our beach house, or we need to remodel. So that's how a lot of it started, Hill Country, Steamboat Springs, Colorado. But I also, prior to the level of technology that we have now, I used to pick up jobs when I was traveling. I would be there and a friend would say, we need you to look at for one, in fact, one time my friend's mother's house was like from 1790 in North Yarmouth, Maine.
Wow.
The staircases are like this wide and each stair is about this tall, this, and this tall, depending. That was very exciting. And then I've done a little bit of work in Alaska where my husband's from. We go up there. I consulted on the Civic Center in the town of Ketchikan. And then also I was at the Civic Center. So the manager of the Civic Center said, hey, can you come by my house? So a lot of it started like that.
Yeah.
But today, much of our design is in a digital format. We do a lot of PowerPoints and mood boards, which we send electronically. We have not done a physical mood board where we pasted things onto poster board for a really long time, because most of the time now we send it electronically. So that has expanded, I think, the level of sophistication you can do when you don't even have to really touch ground in the location. Or you plan very, very carefully and you make specific trips there during key points, and you come loaded for bear. You are prepared to get a lot of stuff done on every trip.
That's really good. Now, what is your favorite part of being an interior designer? I always ask that question because everybody's answer is so different. What do you love about it so much?
I would love to hear everyone's answers. So I think for me, it's probably, I feel there are so many good designers in the city. My colleagues are so talented and I'm inspired and awed by them all the time. And some days you think, oh, this is really good. And some days you think, how did she do that? It's just so amazing. So I love that about design. But I feel that one of my probably superpowers in design is I really get my clients. I had a discussion with my new administrative designer this morning, trying to show her how I take little tiny hints from people that I may not know at all, and I try to come up with a concept so that the first time I present an idea to them, whether it's verbally or it's a photo or it's a piece of fabric, I think they're going to get it. And I do feel, for some reason, I connect with people, and we joke I have a spidey sense, because I'll say something like, we should call Mrs. Smith because, and literally the phone will ring. And I don't consider myself woo-woo or psychic, but for some reason in design, I am tuned in.
Hey, maybe that's from your previous career.
Maybe it is. Maybe I'm doing a little data analysis in my head. I don't know.
That could be part of that too. I mean, I can totally see that. No, I think that's wonderful, because as an interior designer, I think that's a very important piece, that you have to kind of understand what they want and then be able to present them something that they're going to love.
Well, it speeds up and it simplifies the process, because you may and they may want you to do something crazy and different. You never know. But I think, at least in the very beginning, presenting things that they're like, oh yeah, I really like that kind of thing. And in the back, I'm thinking, I knew that because I saw this, you said that, your husband mentioned something else. So it's intelligence gathering.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nadine. I mean, you've just solved the problem.
Put a piece of the puzzle together.
Thank you, U.S. Customs Service.
That is so
for now being, pretty good at design. But yes, it's intelligence gathering and analysis. It really is.
That is so funny. And I'm always amazed by interior designers and how you can put things together and make people think about things that they would have necessarily thought about that they liked or even didn't like. And some of the questions, I've worked with interior designers before, and some of the questions that are asked to clients, and I'm thinking, wow, like I would have never thought to ask those specific questions in order to pull from the client what they need, and it's amazing to me.
It's always interesting to read other designers' questionnaires, because every time you see a question, you go, oh, that's a really smart question, and I should ask that sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to me. Now, getting a little bit back to the Alaska connection, I know you say you have done some projects over there. Your husband is from there. That's one place that I haven't been that I would really love to visit. We travel a lot too.
I remember that about you.
Yeah, and I think it's that's one place that I'll have to put on my bucket list to go visit.
Everyone really enjoys it. It's really a great trip. I think it's great. I know you have children. It's a great trip with children. A lot of Alaska is very coastal. There are many interesting inland things to do, but if you're just going to go one time, or if you're going to just start it out, the cruises are a great way to do it because it's very water-based. So when you're going on the water, you're already part of that whole water culture. And then many of the locations are really best arrived at by water. So in some places, like where our family has a cabin, you can get there two ways: float plane or boat. There are no roads. So that is it. Those are your two modes of transportation.
I heard about that. The cruises are a really beautiful way to see Alaska.
Because you get to see lots of wildlife, whales. I mean, you see a ton of wildlife in Alaska now. It is very exciting.
Oh, I'll have to definitely put that on my list. But one question about that: when is the best time to go?
So it's definitely summer.
Okay.
They do have skiing in Alaska. The Northern Lights is usually winter to early spring, mainly because the Northern Lights may be happening, but if there's too much daylight, and as you go farther north, you get almost midnight sun, you won't see them. They might be dancing around like crazy, but you can't see them because it's not dark enough. So for coastal Alaska, it's definitely, they call it like Southeast and like the Inside Passage. That's definitely a summer vacation. A lot of that area is very, very rainy. It's a rainforest, and a temperate rainforest, meaning it's not hot and sweaty like I think most of us think, Amazon, 100 degrees. No, it's a cool rainforest, but it is a lot of water. It's part of the life up there. That is why they have trees that are so many feet high. That's why the forest floor is covered in lichen and ferns, and it's just part of the culture and the ecosystem. But sometimes it's a lot of rain. It's a lot of rain for me, I'll admit. It's a lot of rain for me, and it's a lot of rain sometimes for visitors. So you just go prepared, and you put on your raincoat, and you pull your hood up, and you go trek around with your waterproof boots.
Now, getting back to your interior design business. You mentioned you have a small but mighty team, right?
Yes.
And you work on a lot of large projects, large full house builds and renovations. How many projects do you typically work on at a time?
I like the number of about 18, but sometimes it gets to maybe 21, 23. When it gets to around 25, it starts to, I think, let's see how many of these are close to completion, because it's getting to be a lot. But when I say that many, that's not 23 large new construction homes. There'll be, for example, right now, we just picked dining room chairs for a former client. She said, it's time, my dining room chairs are falling apart. I love everything else you did last year and the year before. So that's not a huge project, but that's still on the board as one of our projects. We do decorating projects. We do refreshes. We have a wonderful client from years and years and years and years who they're going to be in their home for like another year and a half. They're building, but they have their last son graduating from high school, so that backyard has to look nice, which means all of the cushions on the 25 pieces of outdoor furniture are getting replaced this month because we have to be ready for our graduation pool party. So we do a lot of that kind of work on large and small scales, but we normally do have a couple of new construction and several significant remodeling projects going at any time. So 18 to 20 is very normal for us with projects of various sizes. We're actually doing quite a bit of commercial right now.
Really?
There's several commercial projects. Yeah, those are fun. And those are often spillover from clients who hire us for their residences, and then they have an office situation. Although one of my largest commercial clients, he actually hired me specifically to work on him with his apartment investments. And over time, I've also pivoted to work on his homes. And now we're looking at doing some office space for his different businesses and interests.
So you have a lot of return clients.
We do. We are so grateful. That takes a while. From somebody who started with zero, no clients at all, the idea of having a client who would call you back in a few years was like a dream come true. It takes a while to establish it, but yes, if you do your work right and you take care of the clients, who hopefully they'll never call anyone else. Why would they call anyone else?
If somebody's satisfied with what you do.
Clients for life.
Exactly.
And multi-generational. We have a couple where we've done this long enough that we have done things for their children or maybe a sister or even their mother. Sometimes it works. It goes up and down the generation scale.
So if a new client wants to get in contact with you for a project, what is the first steps that they take and you take to kind of feel for somebody if it's a project you can take on or want to? What is your process on that at the beginning?
Well, we do have a process for it because some weeks we get 10 or 15 calls and some weeks we only get 1 or 2, but it can be time consuming to see, is this a good fit? Are we a good designer for you? So we have a process. You can either call us or you can email us. You can go on our website. We have a contact us form. It has a very, very, very short little questionnaire just to give us a couple of hints, like where are you? And are you in Dubai? Or are you in Montgomery County, Texas?
Okay.
A few key details. From that, we then send you an email with a little bit more information and a brochure about how we work with a little bit longer questionnaire. Again, it's not really too scary and off-putting. It talks a little bit about your goals. Have you worked with the designer? What's the approximate size of the project? The schedule? When are you hoping to start? And we also do talk about budget because some people drive Kias and some people drive Maseratis, and we don't know where you are in the spectrum, and I don't know which dealership to take you to if I'm your car rep. So we need to talk a little bit about budget so we have a feel for where we would be able to help you, which vendors and showrooms we would use, who would be the right contractor. So with that information, we read that and we think about whether, if we think we're a good fit, do we have time? Can we meet your budget? Can we meet your deadlines? And depending on that, we either email you back to get a little bit more information, or we set up, we call it a design discovery call. And that's usually with me. Occasionally it's with my design manager, Dana Smith. And we talk to the client and we talk a little bit about the design process and delve a bit more into their goals, needs, budget, and then schedule. Schedule is a key point right now.
Yeah, absolutely, I'm sure.
Everybody, if you're good at design and construction right now, you're busy.
Yeah.
And so the people who are ready to start tomorrow, very few people are going to be able to start tomorrow. I would recommend for anyone listening with any interest in projects down the road, it's really never too early to start getting your design team together.
Planning is very important.
Yes.
Another thing about you is, we know you travel a lot. You have spent lots of time in France and Italy, so I'm sure that had helped you quite a bit in your interior design business, right? Because as we know, I think France, especially Paris and Italy, is a big part of anything design, right?
Yes.
So how do you think that helped you to, grow the business that you have?
Well, when I was a teenager, my goal was to be a European girl, which was hard because I was living in Kingwood, Texas. But I took French and spoke it pretty well, and I was able to be an exchange student my senior year in high school. I was the first student from Kingwood High School to go for the year with a program called AFS, and I went to northern Italy to a town called Turin or Torino. Very beautiful, very elegant part of Italy, quite different from a lot of the southern Italy that people know. So I got exposed to a different part. It's wine's very important, food, things like truffles and Barbera, very elevated Italian food is from that area. And I lived in a villa with a family, a very interesting, fascinating home. That was a wonderful experience. And I know I drove my mother crazy because I came home before I went to college that summer, and I'm like, well, in Italy we did this, and in Italy we did that, because I thought I just loved the way they managed their kitchen and their shopping and their cooking. And my mom was kind of like, okay, fine, go back to Italy. Or go to college, like leave me alone. But my family was always super supportive, and my parents, made it possible for me to go. But having really always loved French as my probably favorite language, although Italian's a lot of fun, I did love French. And so in college, I decided I'd take the opportunity to do a junior year abroad, and I did that in Paris. And my little delving into design is I lived in a place called La Maison des Étudiantes, which means for girl students, no boys allowed. And I had a French roommate, Frédéric. That was really fun. And we had these kind of sad looking, probably 150-year-old rooms in this old house. There were 4 showers for the entire floor and a couple of bathrooms. And of course we thought, oh God, you'll have to wait in line for a shower. Nope, not really true. Never really had to wait in line for a shower. Somehow they were always available. But the rooms were not terribly elegant. I got there a bit early, and I noticed that our bedspreads didn't match. So there were lots of other rooms. So I went down the hall and waited and looked until I could find 2 matching bedspreads. And we had armoires, no closets, because this was an old building prior to closets being, part of construction technology. And I actually had to go up 2 or 3 floors, and on an elevator, I moved an armoire myself so that my roommate, Frédéric, and I would have better looking armoires. And so that was the beginning of my very subtle design at La Maison des Étudiants. And then on weekends, I didn't have a lot of money. I mean, I was a student. So, every now and then you'd save up a little and you'd go shopping. And I tended to buy small things from my room. And the women who would come clean the rooms for us would always, on Mondays, this one lady would say, okay, what did you buy over the weekend? Or she'd look and say, oh, I see, you got a new pillow. And so I was kind of known for decorating the dorm rooms that didn't have a whole lot to start with, but we tried to make them a bit cuter.
Oh, that's so great. That's a great story.
That was fun. That was
amazing.
A fun part of it.
And now before we close, I'm going to ask you my very popular question of a funny story or a horror story that you might have that you've experienced. You've been a designer for 24 years now, so I'm sure there's lots of things that have occurred over the years. So what is, for entertainment value, something that you can share that may have been funny?
Well, I thought back, and there's probably lots and lots and lots, but there's one that I don't think I could ever forget. Early days of design, I was doing a lot of use what you have. I would come in and I would redo, your bookshelves look fantastic, but not everyone's look that good. I would move the chair, I'd move the table, and I would do a quick rearrange and refresh with a couple of possible construction or higher level design ideas. And that was my appointment. That was at least the first appointment. Got paid, handed them an invoice, in and out, great. So I go to this woman's house, and she's in an apartment, but she actually has quite a bit of nice stuff. It was the days of roosters and Tuscan colors, but we all liked that at the time. And she had nice things. I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. And I mean, I hung the art myself. I was moving art around, and she sat down and she went onto the patio because she was smoking, and she said, I'm not really one to tell my business. Well, as soon as someone says that,
they're about to.
And she's sitting down with a pack of cigarettes. I'm like, I'm just going to have a lot to listen to, and I'm just going to hang these rooster pictures and, rearrange her shelves. So she goes on and on about her husband, and it's sounding like a bit of a weird relationship, and she's not really sure about him, and she's a little concerned. And then all of a sudden we hear this bang, and she goes, oh, it's my husband. And I'm like, well, he lives here too, right? And she's like, go hide in the closet. Literally tells me to go hide in the closet.
What?
For how long? And do what? And I was like, I can't go hide in the closet. She's like, he can't know you're here. I'm like, well, I have to leave. And I have to walk out through the door. So she had already paid me and had left the checkbook or something, and she didn't want him to see the money. It was just the weirdest thing ever. But when someone asks you, go hide in the closet, seriously?
That's an interesting story.
Yeah, how is that going to solve? This is going to be a problem. And maybe it solves your problem, but it creates a whole new problem for me because now I'm in your closet for who knows how long.
Yeah, how many hours that you might have to sit. Oh, that's hilarious.
I think they resolved it. He actually called me later and asked me about the bill, and I thought, oh, he's going to start complaining. He didn't complain. He said, did she pay you? And I said, yes. He said, well, I see the checkbook, but it doesn't look like it's the same money as the invoice. I said, well, she gave me some money in cash, which was true. But anyway, I was expecting a far worse phone call at that point because my opinion of the husband was based on what she told me. He seemed perfectly nice, but I had gotten quite an earful.
I have to say, that's probably the best story I've heard so far from any of my guests. That's an interesting one.
Right? It was just weird.
That's very strange. Well, this was fun, Pamela. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. And you can follow her on Instagram, Pamela Hope Designs, website, if anybody's interested in reaching out or looking at more of your projects.
Yes,
they can do so. And until then, stay tuned for the next one. Bye.
Thanks. It was fun.